My name is Trevor Hewitt. I come from the county of Norfolk in East Anglia, England, and this is why I'm here in Fargo. To go back to May the 8th, 1944, in England, close to my home, there's an American air base called Horsham St Faith, where the 458th Bomb Group were stationed for the duration of World War II. One of those aircraft, which is approximately the third aircraft off down the runway that morning, was a B-24H called, nicknamed the Belle of Boston. The crew who were flying it that day was the crew of Lieutenant Paul Elton Kingsley from Broadus in Texas. 10 young men, young American airmen on board. Unfortunately, going down the runway, the co-pilot, flying officer Homer Houseman, couldn't keep all the engines running, and they lost one of the engines due to icing up, due to the icy conditions. Lieutenant Kingsley got past the point of transition where he had to take off. He got the aircraft into the air, managed to keep it in the air for about 1.5 miles off of the airfield, where unfortunately it hit some big English oak trees. My late grandfather and father lived with my grandmother, lived approximately 100 yards away from this crash site. And they were still in bed because it was early in the morning. They heard the bang, they heard the noise. My grandfather and father got out of their respective beds in their night clothes and went downstairs and out to see these smoke and flames from this big B-24 Liberator which had crashed. They had to crawl on their hands and knees and in a roadside ditch to get to the crash site, which was about 100 yards away, as I said, because the 50 caliber machine gun bullets were going off in the fires and whizzing off in all directions. So they had to keep their head down. Another neighbour joined them in getting to the crash site. His name was Mr. Albert Seidel. They could hear men shouting, and they could hear crying and various other things. And they went into the inferno, and some men were beyond help. Some of these young men, they could not do anything for it. It became very apparent very quickly. But they did retrieve from the wreckage about 6 or 7 of the guys out of it. They could hear someone shouting through the smoke and flames. They couldn't see them because there was so much smoke, but they could hear this voice shouting, so they just headed towards it. And they'd gone a few yards and they found one of the aircraft's engines, a big Pratt & Whitney radial engine. And underneath that engine was the ball turret gunner from the Belle of Boston, Sergeant Albert Nix.
I'm Angie Ross from Fargo, North Dakota. My father is Albert Nix. He joined the Army, which then was the Army Air Force. Actually, he was sent to Africa, first of all, for the B-24 Liberator in the crew there, and then he was transferred to England and in the Horsham St Faith Air Base. He did not talk about this war at all. We did know that he crashed in a plane because we knew that all of his life he wore a back brace. And we knew that he was in a body cast. He told us that. He never talked to, if he did, he talked to my mom. But I doubt that too, because she would never tell us anything either. So we went without any information at all.
He was trapped and he was alive and making a lot of noise apparently. So what happened then was my grandfather and Mr. Seidel lifted the engine off of Albert, and this thing weighed 1/4 ton. And my father, at 14.5 years old, got hold of Mr. Nix and dragged him away from the fires. And they had to put his clothes out because he was smouldering a bit apparently. And he was badly injured, but he was alive. I grew up with this story, from a young boy. I knew this crash site. I played on this crash site because it was in my friend's garden. I used to find bits of the aeroplane and didn't really think much about it at that age. You just bits of aeroplane. It wasn't until much later in life that I realised that I'd got two sons who were the same age as these young men, 18-year-old, one of them, on the aircraft, and it was quite poignant. And but my dad really didn't speak about it. But as time went on, I managed to get a statement from him of a story of what had actually happened that day. And I quickly realised that I had to recognise these young men. They were 6,000 miles from home, and they were giving their lives to keep my country safe. So I thought, yeah, this needs to be recognised. So I decided to put a memorial in our village. Our village, Frettenham, is this very small village where I live. It's a tiny village. But by this time, I decided also to try and trace the crew, or relatives of the crew. I managed to trace, with the help of a gentleman called Darren Scorza, who lives in Kansas City, Missouri, whose father also served in the 458th Bomb Group and is like a historian for the group. He has vast records about the 458th. I contacted him, and with his help, we managed to find another man who lived in Norwich, in the city of Norwich, just a few miles from me, also put me in contact with a gentleman who lives in Texas called Ben Hooker.
Some of his friends that he had mentioned, or he had letters from them, but he didn't ever answer them. And so I said, well, could I possibly write to them for you? You know, and he said, no, just no. When he died, I felt responsible in answering him. So that's how everything got started, because Ben Hooker found out who I was and where I was.
And he was a cousin of the pilot, and he was friendly with him. So I contacted Ben to see if I could find any information about Lieutenant Kingsley, his cousin. And he did. He had lots of information, and he put me in touch with the pilot's sister and brother, and the son as well. Also, I asked a question at that time, do you have any other contact details for any of the other crew? And he said, yes, I have one. Her name is Mrs. Angela Ross.
Then I come upon Trevor Hewitt. He gave me a call one day, and he is very, very English, which I had no idea whatsoever. So I thought somebody was trying to sell me something, so I was kind of trying to put him off.
I rang her completely out of the blue, and she did have a bit of a job to understand what I was talking about, or probably thought I was trying to sell her something. But she soon picked up on the gist of what I was doing.
And it was kind of unusual and funny, because he was trying to tell me that he wanted to talk to me really bad. And anyways, I finally got the idea that he wanted to let me know something about what was transpiring in this crash. I learned more over that phone call about my dad than my dad had ever told any of us. By the time I hung up on that phone call, it was just mind-boggling.
And to cut a long story very short, I went on to trace all 10 crew members' families throughout America, and have had contacts over the years with them. Angela travelled with Angie, with her brother Larry, over to England a few years back, and stayed with myself and my parents at our house in Frettenham, and our friendship was gone from there onwards.
Possibly me,
Possibly
right?
Angie. So we went to the 458 Bomb Group website. That picture came up as a top right. We hoped to be able to get together.
We hope, yeah.
Hope
you
to
know,
get together.
You never know from one day to the next, but
in 2024 for the 80th anniversary of the
it sounds
crash.
like a winner.
Yeah, we're hoping to get together and reaffirm the closeness again from the two nations, because to quote Winston Churchill, two great nations divided by a common language, and it still goes on. Yeah.
You said it all.
Yeah.